sports energy. We don't need it here. So if they put these things up, it's for somewhere else. We're a conduit.
We have a 20 to 25% surplus in electrical generation because of all the small hydro plants and stuff up here.
But
And there was, you know, the public outcry, people did what they could, but when push comes to shove, it's the property owner agreed to allow it, so.
The rumor is that, has a budget paid for 15 years because of that.
I think we're all set.
Okay, we're all set, we're just waiting for the TV.
I think she gave us the okay, right?
She did, but then she told me to wait a minute, so I'm waiting for her. Sorry. Great, okay, thanks, Julie. Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I apologize for our delay. We were hoping our board member that's missing, Mr. Burnham, would be able to join us, and hopefully he will still come in. I'll start with a roll call. And say I'm Patrice Scott. Here. Neil MacGyver.
Here.
Freeman Plummer.
Here.
Butch Cushing.
Here.
Okay, we're all accounted for. It's just Howard is hopefully on his way. Now we need to look at the minutes from June 5th. Does anybody have any corrections? I had a couple typos on pages 4 and 6. Just in the first dark bulleted discussion of conditions, it's the word exemption is used instead of special exception. And then on page 6.
I'm sorry, where was that?
Page 4, you see the first dark bullet? On the special exemption, the second line.
Supposed to be exception.
Oh, the bullet, yeah.
Special exception.
Yeah, I think that, yeah. I did that a couple places, I guess I didn't see it.
Yeah. And then on page 6, down to the 1, 2, 3, 4th dark bullet, the second line, it should be billboards, plural.
Yep.
Advertise, singular, a business that is not on site. Just strike that out. And then for clarity, that last sentence, in this case, we have an applicant instead of somebody, an applicant who felt the wrong criteria were used. I think that clarifies it a little. And that's all I had. I entertain a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, we have this evening for public hearing, case number 248009, SE 010 071012, request for special exception to allow additional accessory buildings in excess of the maximum 3 on Hunt Road in the agricultural zone. This use is allowed by special exception in the ag zone. And we have Mr. and Mrs. is it Schomer? Schomer here this evening. Would you like to come and present your application? For the public hearing?
Thank you.
Thank you.
What we'd like to try to accomplish is 382 acres up there. what we're trying to come up with is a central lodge where the family could get together and we could cook and that type of thing. And then we're planning to have up to 5 cabins, small 18 by 26 cabins, each family. We have 4 kids that are married and 9 grandkids, and who knows what the limit of that's going to be. So what we're trying to do is create an environment where they can have their own sleeping areas, that type of thing, and a central gathering area. One of them wants to put a yurt up, so that's another little, you know what those are, right? So that's what we're trying to accomplish. We are already under construction of a pole barn to house the maintenance equipment, tractor, whatever. So that's underway now. And so what we're looking for is, currently you're allowed a major building and 3 outbuildings, correct? So what we're looking for is a total of 8. So central building and 7 outbuildings.
Okay, that's what could we just go through the outbuildings? You want a center lodge,
Yeah.
and then you have a pole barn.
Correct.
Okay. And then up to 5
Cabins
cabins
and a yurt.
and a yurt. Okay, that's the one that wasn't in the application. Right.
Yes. No, well, I think what I did was increase the number of cabins. I think in the application I might have said 4. I think it said 4 or 5, so now it's 5.
It says 6 accessory buildings to include 1 pole barn and 5 cabins.
Okay. Yeah, the yurt, so then the yurt was a bolt on. Because when I came in and discussed this with Sharon, the yurt people will tell you it's a tent.
Right.
But, and I guess towns look at it in different ways, but because it sits on a deck, it becomes immovable. So it also requires its own little building permit, so.
Okay, so, well, that's all, I just want to make sure that's included in the cabins, or that's separate from the 5
That was
cabins?
separate, that would be separate.
Okay.
So you're looking for 4 additional beyond the maximum?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, main
Okay.
lodge, 3.
Yep.
Well, that's
Three
great.
accepted and 4.
Exactly.
Okay, so everybody has that. We have the center lodge, the pole barn, 5 cabins, and 1 yurt.
In the application, I think I included some of the drawings and sketches and things like that. I have additional photos if you want to take a look.
Now we have this,
I also have a photo of the yurt, if you want to see what that looks like.
I'd be interested in seeing
Okay.
that.
So this is,
Okay, this is the cabin type.
that's correct. Yeah, these are the cabin, this is the, why don't I just give these out? If you could share those, that'd be great, because I only have 3. So,
That's the whole one.
Go ahead, I've already seen.
oh, that might be a little different than, all right. So on the first page, it just basically gives a geographical, like a topographical of the land in question. So the little light green is what we're talking about, and the red is just the abutter's property.
Okay.
This must be.
And then if you go to the next page, I think this was included in the application, it basically shows the logging roads that are there today. And what we're in the process of doing is taking some of those logging roads and making them 12-foot wide gravel pack, 18 inches deep. So we've already completed the, see where it says lower cleared area, the 130 by 250? That's done, and we've gone up to the Y that you see in, see the 610-foot dimension. We've already gone up to the Y and stopped. Because there's no reason for me to go any further until I figure out how many buildings I can have. So that's kind of the progress we've made. If you go to the next page, that shows you where the pole barn is actually going to be located.
Okay, we
So
have to-
it's down in that lower cleared area. About roughly 350 feet off Hunt Road or so, something like that.
No, that's just a round.
We originally were thinking that we were going to try to develop, if you, that same thing, that cleared area on the left, that 260 by 330. The problem is that there's some wetland issues in there, or it's, you know, it's wet, and I don't want to mess with all of that. And it's a pretty radical slope. So rather than try to get involved in that, we're going to go, spend the additional money and go up to the top where we know it's dry, we know it's flat. And so now the idea is, we go back one page, is to locate the lodge and the cabins in that, where it says 275 foot by 490 foot cleared area.
Okay.
It'll be up there somewhere, we don't exactly know where yet. And the yurt actually will be, if you continue, and you see 1,133 feet, and then you take a right, at the end of that road is where they're planning to put the yurt.
Okay.
So that's kind of the locations we're looking at. As far as the lodge goes, we have several concepts. One was to buy an antique barn, have it disassembled, pour a pad or foundation, reassemble it. We're struggling with that a little bit because a lot of the barns that you find have termite damage and things like that, which I really don't want to mess with. So probably what will happen is it'll either be log construction or it'll be just a stick-built dwelling. And then, so I think these are the same. The next pages show the cabin design. Those will actually be made by Merrimack Log Homes over in Henniker, I think they're located. So they've already designed them, and so that's all I really have to do is turn the key, and 6 weeks from now the lumber will start getting delivered. And that's a little shot of what they look like assembled.
Do they build them here? Will they build them here, or do they build them and bring them here?
They cut them. They cut all of the logs as a kit. Then no, they don't. Then they deliver the kit, and then they assemble them on site.
Okay.
And the next couple of pages are just photos of what the cabins actually look like. It's pretty much a stock thing. This company primarily cuts logs for other log cabin manufacturers. So, but they have a couple of prepackaged deals that they put together. And the last page is a picture of the yurt.
I'd rather be in a yurt than a little cabin?
You never know.
To each his own, right?
They love these things. I don't know. They're hikers, campers. They really like, that family likes to do, to get a little closer to nature than the rest of them. The rest of them enjoy a little more comfort than the yurt thing.
That's great. All right, now in these cabins, what will be in them? It's just sleeping quarters, or are there?
The plan now is sleeping quarters, toilet, and sink. No kitchen, no nothing. So it's just basically a place to sleep. What I envision is putting a septic system in that's, maybe a 5-bedroom design septic system where the cabins and the lodge will all feed into one central thing. If you envision this thing, it's kind of like building a 5-bedroom house and then not putting the bedrooms there, just sticking them as a cluster around a center lodge. So but the cabins will be very, very simple. They're actually, remember, we're going to be off grid. The electric company's going to want somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 to run the power in there. So rather than give them $80,000, I'm thinking it's a much better plan to do solar and wind on the property. So that's the plan, with backup generator to recharge the batteries if we have a week with no sun.
Well, that's a great idea. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Sherman?
First thing you have to do is upgrade the road so that you can get equipment in there.
Well, I've already done that, actually. I've already rebuilt it. We built a steel bridge over the old one that was there before, out of 18-inch I-beams. That's already been done on Hunt Road, I'm talking about. But we've already signed the waiver that was required in order to get this far, which says we'll hold the town harmless as far as emergency services go. So that's already.
It's just a point of edification on that. The town has finally come to fruition on a Class 6 liability waiver, which is required by anyone doing any development on a Class 6 road, and that protects the town against any potential liability should emergency service vehicles not be able to, or anything else, be able to get there. So it's essentially saying, you know where you are, you know what you're getting into, and you're fully cognizant of the fact that you're the master of your own destiny here. So that's signed, sealed, and literally delivered to the registry. And that was a very strong caveat for this to start with.
And that's already been registered with the Registry of Deeds and
That's signed before you can get a building permit, right? And the planning board signs off on that?
No, the
Or-
select board does.
Oh, the select,
Yeah.
okay.
Right. And you should have a copy, I sent you a copy in the package,
Yes.
so it's this document. Sorry,
Yeah,
about the
we
registry.
do, we have the
Yeah.
Class 6 road acknowledgement notice of limits of municipal responsibility. Okay, now, how many acres, you said you may have to take acres out of current use?
For use, yeah. I'm thinking that apparently it also includes the roadways. So including the roadways, we're probably talking about somewhere between 3 and 4 coming out of current use.
3 to 4 acres, and so I'm just wondering about that. That's not a density problem, where the building is going to be concentrated, where the little cabins are going to be concentrated.
In what regard?
Just on minimum lot size for a building?
It's one lot. Current use has no aspect on lot size.
No.
Okay, but
It's
the
total.
acres that are going to be developed
It's still,
is one lot?
it's 389 acres.
Yeah, it's just a
period.
taxation.
Oh, okay.
It's a
The other's only
taxation.
about revenue.
It's a taxation formula, so when you say they'd be taking them out of current use, those 3 or 4 acres will actually be a tax gain for the town, because they'll be taxed on different levels, so. Right, but he's got a really, really big lot, so.
Okay, so that whole current use is considered one lot?
Correct.
Okay, that's what it
It's a
is.
tax designation, not an area designation, but it has aspects of that.
Okay.
Hunt Road isn't subject to gates and bars, is it?
Well, inherently class 6 it is, but nobody's got.
Right. And if it was, they would have to remain in law because it's still class 6 road.
Okay, and is this primarily for recreational use, or you mentioned that you intend to use it about 9 months out of the year, or is that?
Yeah, I can't imagine. What I envision is that 3 of the 4 families will use this 3 seasons and never be up in the wintertime. The family that's in the yurt, they're coming. They'll be up there, the snowshoe.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's what I see happening up there.
Uh-huh. Okay, and you mentioned the septic plan you have to apply for that.
Well, yes, I do, but I can't really do that until we know we can go forward with the plan in general. Then we can talk about where the cabins will be, and that'll obviously then dictate where the septic has to be, because it's got to be downhill. We won't have the luxury of pumping it up, right, because we don't have any power. So once we get through this phase, then we can decide where the cabins and the lodge will be. Then we can decide what the possible places. Well, with 382 acres, I'll assure you, we'll find a place downhill to put a septic system in.
Okay, well, does anybody have?
I assume there's quite a bit of wildlife that goes through there.
I'm hoping.
Having any ideas about stopping hunting going on in there?
Well, one of the primary reasons we purchased the property was I have several sons that are interested and grandkids that are interested in hunting. So obviously that's one of the activities we'll be pursuing.
Yeah. But the general public?
I don't really know. Right now it's posted. So we really haven't made that decision yet. And I with 382 acres, I doubt I'm ever going to see anybody else on the property anyway.
You never can tell.
Yeah, I know.
Bullets fly a long ways.
I know that.
Okay, Butch, do you have any questions?
Nice. Answered most of mine.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Schirmer. I think if nobody has any questions, I'll ask for anybody in the audience. Would anybody like to speak in favor, or? Yes, sir? Could you identify yourself, please?
Sure. Jim Doyle, I'm the neighbor down, just down from the lot. And welcome to the neighborhood. Thank you. I just, I've got some concerns about the road, and it's a seasonally maintained road between December 10th and April 10th from the Hebron side up on through where we live. And so I'm responsible, or not responsible, as the case may be, for plowing, sanding. We live up there all year round. And so I'm concerned that the road's going to deteriorate with the amount of traffic, the use, if it's going to be three-season use. The winter's not so bad, but the spring is absolutely horrific. There's really no base on the road. It just turns into a quagmire, and probably a dozen or so more times, my wife and I end up parking down below and walking up. And so that's okay, we recognize that when we bought the property. So I'm a little concerned that the road's going to take a real beating, much worse than it is now. We maintain it, we do the best we can. We don't put a whole lot of time or effort into it, but it's sufficient for what we need it for. And with the increase in traffic, with 5 families, I did a little bit of research. The DOT figures 8 car trips per unit, per household. So if you figure that into the equation, it's another 40 or so trips potentially up and down the road. So I just want to see how that's all going to be addressed by the board. And I have some photographs here, and you can pass them around or save them. I can make copies.
Okay, where do you live, Mr. Doyle?
On 408 Hunt Road.
How do you access your property?
I'm sorry, Mr. Doyle,
From
which home are you?
We're just up from Mitch and Phyllis, the pink house. I don't know if you've met them.
You're the last house on the left.
We're the last house on the left, right, where the end of the utility poles.
The last pole.
Last pole, that's us, yeah.
So you're concerned about the road up to your house, I guess?
Well, yeah, from John Black's all the way up the steep part where it becomes a seasonal cottage road, or whatever the definition is. So that's, I just wanted to make you aware of that and just see this side of the board and see how. Yeah, that's down on 3A. And the next photograph, that's right outside of our driveway. And that's,
Yeah, I know where the rock is.
yeah, that's in Basswater. At some points, and then that's
This guy?
right down where our neighbor is, right here. And there have been issues since they've been seasonal.
He lives on Hunt Road.
There's a seasonal resident now just down below us that was never occupied, full-time. And there have been drainage issues and so on and so forth with that. So with another impact to the road, I just want to make sure that that's all addressed
How are they
and taken
coming
into
in?
consideration.
So they're coming in through Bridge. Okay. That must be where he lives.
Like I say, in the wintertime, it's not so bad. I mean, you just.
Is this frozen?
Yeah, it's frozen, you just push the snow downhill, but it's not maintained for, I think the distance between our driveway
It's actually in
and
the
the
town.
point that it's maintained is about a half a mile.
3A.
So from December 10th to April 10th, there's a half a mile that's not maintained, which I plow, and I don't sand it, because when we walk, when we don't.
That's where the Whippoorwill Motel is.
So,
And this,
anyway.
you're actually, this is the Plymouth side, right?
Yeah, we are in Plymouth,
Yes.
yeah, we're just over the town
You
line.
come in from Hebron?
I come in from the Bridgewater Hebron off of 3A. Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Doyle, so probably pretty much on a regular basis in the spring when it is a quagmire, I mean, you just have to adapt,
We adapt.
which I believe you folks are probably aware of. I mean, you know how far.
Well, I think that,
The
I'm going to use the mic,
handlebars
or can I speak from here?
Would you, just because it reproduces better, thank you.
It's got.
What I envision is, because have you gone down further towards my property?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So we've already regraded the road from basically where you are down, rebuilt the bridge, and then regraded it up to get on the property. And what I envision is every spring, I'm going to have to go in there and regrade that thing. I mean, because I see what kind of damage the winter does and the spring does. So that'd be my intention, and we'll help you out with going up to your house.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. I mean, the whole idea is to get the roads, because they all drive regular vehicles. They're not driving like jacked up pickup trucks that can't go through anything. I mean, we're talking about getting in there with a regular SUV. So I consider the road from where that sign is, and I know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
up the steep grade to your property, it's part of the game. I mean, we're going to have to, together, keep that thing so it's passable.
Okay. I understand that Hebron and Bridgewater, though, coming up that, I think it's 10% or something, are reluctant to put too much into it because most of the tax dollars are coming over this way and not going over to Hebron and Bridgewater. So just as everybody's aware of that. And the more you improve the road, the more traffic it gets used. You get the, you know what it is. Huh?
Exactly. No, I think the family, we've actually had that conversation because when we started to improve Hunt Road,
Right.
the conversation the family had was, wait a minute, how much improvement do we want to do? Because what we don't want to do is encourage more traffic to go down. So that's kind of a fine balance. Okay, you got to get it so it's passable, but you don't want to make it a thoroughfare because then you'll end up with all kinds of fun people coming out.
Madam Chair, I don't know if Mr. Murphy, our zoning officer, wants to speak at all about the roads. We've been, just to add to
No,
this facet of the conversation.
Well, it goes back to where you're going to gain access from the road. And obviously, you can get there from both ends, either from Plymouth, the Bridgewater side.
Yeah.
But your intent is to come through Hebron?
Well, that's the most convenient because it's closest.
Okay. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Doyle, for bringing up that point. And is there anybody else who'd like to say anything? Anybody in favor or opposed? No? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. And I would ask the board members to make some fact findings. Applicants have signed what's the name of the document?
Oh, it's a memorandum of liability.
Signed,
Limits of responsibility.
limits of responsibility.
Municipal responsibility,
Document,
which we call the waiver.
which is filed.
It's located in the agricultural zone, right?
Yes, located. So why don't we say how many acres?
Yeah.
It's 382 acres located in
It's going to be seasonal use, or they're planning on seasonal use primarily.
right? Planning primarily seasonal
Just
use.
left side.
How about something about the kind of, it's a non-traditional, I like to say multi-generational.
It's a family.
Yes, family, but multi-generational family compound. And they're asking for additional separate units, accessory buildings, to enable, to accommodate all family members. Development will be of 2 to 3 acres.
Right.
Did we say
Which
2 to 3 or 3 to 4? 3 to 4.
3 to 4, which will be taken out of current use. So.
Will be on 3 to 4 acres. of current use.
Do we state in that fact finding the number of buildings now?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see.
Single
Development will include a central lodge,
Pole barn.
Madam Chair, the special exception speaks to additional numbers of accessory buildings, so you're
Okay, so we
looking
just
at
need to-
4 accessory buildings, because you have 4, you have a main and 3 accessory, which is the maximum, which is allowed. Looking for a total of 8 buildings, so you're just looking
So
at
we're just
granting a
looking
special
at
exception
for
for
4.
4, just so we're all
Okay, right. But I want to call them the right thing, 4 additional accessory.
cabins,
Accessory
or
units.
buildings to be used as sleeping cabins or something.
Sleeping units, what did he say?
sleeping.
cabins.
And plumbing.
Sleeping
Well,
cabins.
yeah, but, you know,
Okay, 4
just bedrooms.
additional,
4 accessory cabins.
yes, 4 additional accessory cabins. Okay. That's,
Should I list in that the concerns about the road, or?
I think we should definitely discuss that concern and whether we can say anything.
Well, the Class 6 road itself, there again, you know, it's implicit and inherent and in the statute that if you build along it, you must maintain your
Right, it's
portion.
the property owners.
Right, and it leapfrogs along, and I mean, in a situation where people are going to work together in harmony, that's even better,
Right.
which, you know, will be a future issue, but it's to the detriment of all if any one person along that road doesn't do their part.
Right.
And then
It's
I think you
basically
get
an
into
issue for
civil
property
action,
owners.
yeah,
It's
to
an
get into
issue for
civil
property
action.
owners to work
Okay.
out.
All right.
So, but I definitely want to, you know, just make the comment or note that a neighbor appeared to express a concern. And we encourage the neighbors to work together to alleviate those concerns.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything?
That really can't be one of the criteria. though.
No, it's not a criteria. It's
It
not
would have to
something
be a
you can
comment.
grant. Right.
It can't be a condition of approval.
Right, it can't be because we're not, it's not within our purview, it's a Class 6 road. So,
But it'll be in the minutes as recorded just by this
so there
conversation,
was
so.
a concern, I just want to make sure that we note that and the neighbor's concern and a willingness on the part of the applicant to work with his neighbors. Okay. Okay, well, are we ready to go through our criteria?
Well, I know in the planner report, and Patrice, you and I had spoken before, there was going to be a memorandum of understanding. And Brian, Mr. Murphy, the zoning officer, submitted a draft to John Radigan, our town attorney, who looked at the draft and said he felt in his professional oversight that it would be better to use Brian's initial draft, and he crafted, he being Attorney Radigan, a set of conditions for approval.
Okay.
So you're doing findings of fact right now. Let me just, because we can't get ahead of ourselves here, but I will say, as the planner, one of the concerns vis-a-vis the zoning would be that this could eventually evolve into, you know, a subdivision, a huge commercial camping recreational enterprise, blah, blah, blah. And this memorandum of understanding with the Chalmers was going to be signed and recorded at the registry to preclude that. In lieu of that memorandum of understanding, as I said, Attorney Radigan has come up with conditions of approval, which are fairly ironclad, which speaks to all of that. No sale, sublease, limit of the use of the property to family members and guests. You folks will recognize this when it's read, that he says should be the conditions of approval with any addendum that you might make. I have just, you know, added, you know, applicable permits, blah, blah, blah. This document, should you come to the conclusion after your deliberation that you would like to approve the special exception, this document that I have in my hand, and I'm not giving it to you now because I'm trying carefully not to sway this while still giving you the information, kind of tough, should be used verbatim as conditions are approved. So I'm just giving you a heads up as part of the finding of fact. I think this is the most
Okay.
appropriate place to have that
Well, I
conversation.
think what we should include in the findings of fact is that there was a draft MOU that was being reviewed by council.
It's just morphed into a different document,
And
that's all.
that the zoning board has not had the chance to review at this time, but that we understood that it was in the works.
Thank you.
So we should have that as a fact, that an MOU is, an MOU/legal document is being drafted, and that the board hasn't seen that document yet. Okay, so why don't we go through the special exception criteria. The proposed use shall be only those allowed in this ordinance by special exception. We'll start with Freeman.
True.
True.
Okay, true?
True.
True, okay, and I would cite section 304 on the table of uses, accessory buildings in excess of 3 on page 16. Okay, number 2, the specific site is an appropriate location and of adequate size for the use.
True.
True.
True?
True.
Okay. Number 3, the use as developed will not adversely affect the character of the area in which the proposed use will be located.
True.
True.
I believe that's true, given the description in the application that it's not visible from Hunt Road, and that the large amount of acres that are in the parcel.
True.
Okay, Butch, true?
Yep.
Okay, number 4, there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians.
True.
True.
I believe that's true, again, based on the size of the parcel.
True.
Okay, number 5, the use will not place excessive or undue burden on town services and facilities.
True, they're going to maintain their own property.
True.
I believe that's true, and based on the waiver of municipal liability that was signed.
True.
Okay. And number 6, there would be no significant effect resulting from such use upon the public health, safety, and general welfare of the neighborhood in which the use would be located.
True.
I believe that's true.
True.
True, and I note that all our department heads, including Mr. Murphy, fire and police, and our planner have all signed off and found no problem with the application. All right, so I believe all criteria have been met
Yes,
for the
ma'am.
special exception. And now we move on to considering the, we have to vote?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, move to accept the special exception. That's right, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Butch moved,
Second.
Freeman second, all in favor?
Aye.
Now, would you like to take a short recess to apply conditions?
Yes, I think that's a great idea, and I apologize to the applicants. We have not been able to see this document, so we appreciate that. Okay, good.
Actually, Brian, would you like to show the Shawmers? And Mr. Doyle, too? Do I have no copies here? I hope so. Maybe they could share.
Get copies?
Yes, they could share. Oh, I do have enough.
Okay, do I have to carry anything? Separate recess?
Thank you, Sharon.
From the ZBA?
Okay. We might be right, so.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Are you in recess or are
Yeah,
you
we're
open to
taking a-
presentation?
Well, maybe let them digest this
I think let's
first.
recess and read it, and
Yeah.
then we'll discuss. Butch, you
I
have-
made a couple of suggestions on the planner report, one of which was the MOU, so you can just, the planner report comes back to all required permits, basically.
That's as much as I can tell. our children and grandkids, so like, we don't, I need to get with children. Grandkids are 14 to 40.
Yeah, you have a copy.
So 2 teenagers, those grandkids, 16 and 14, so it's...
Okay, and this is where there should be something on this.
Yeah, that's the boilerplate, and I was just scribbling, so.
In local.
Right, and building permit, state, yeah, and that was in the planner report.
And then
You can
what
read
about,
my other,
yeah, I think that definitely should be there. And then,
the required, yeah, I was scribbling. But this will be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, which the MOU Memorandum of Understanding was also required to be. So that's the ace in the hole that protects the Sharmers, that protects all the abutters from over commercial development, blah, blah, blah.
okay, but instead of having an MOU, this is.
Correct, if I can address that.
Yes, yeah, he can.
Since we're back
Yeah,
down here.
yeah.
When I talked to the attorney today, I said.
John Radigan.
He had already gotten the
What's
bullet
that
points.
verbatim?
He wanted to read through it, and he says, instead of going to the effort of drafting an MOU and all that, he said.
Whereas
because this is a
heretofore,
special exception,
right.
These can go right with the MODs, which since it travels with the land.
Right.
You're essentially cutting out a step, but you're not skipping a step, if you know what I mean. The end result is the same. It carries the
so John
same
said-
force. Most of the points really have nothing to do with zoning.
No, it's a protection.
It's a protection of the
They're
town.
protections,
And
yeah.
between myself and Sharon and Attorney Radigan, we felt that there was plenty of protection.
This
for
is-
both of them.
this is
The town
criteria,
and
yeah.
Right, and putting it in the actual document that.
Right.
It
what
can't
they
be-
granted, so I don't want it lost in some,
Well, exactly, that's the
different file,
point.
you know,
There's no, because, right, 10, 15 years down the road, there's no oops or misinterpretation.
Yeah, we
It's-
saw that paper, but
Right.
it will be at the county, very similar to any covenants or neighborhood association
Yeah.
documents,
Yeah.
always filed that way.
Yeah.
That way there's always a repository.
But I know at first we had, you know, just whomever, some people weren't even appropriately abutters, but, you know, the rumor was there was going to be a campground, and it's like, no. So this says absolutely not, it's going to be this, 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 and this. Yeah, today's rumor is. So
And John Radigan's reviewed this, and this
Right,
is.
and you
what-
know, I came pretty close to hitting on all cylinders with that, because there was only 1 or 2 points that he changed.
But Brian, he did say he wanted this verbatim. In my chicken
Yes.
scratch, I'll just, whatever, that's just a.
Yes, and
boilerplate.
I think it almost goes without saying that septic stuff,
Yes, yeah.
That's just the regular standard.
you know, it doesn't hurt to, you know, reinsert the language, but in order to build, you really do need a septic design if you plan to use, you know. If they chose not to, or if the site was unavailable or couldn't support a group septic, there's certainly nothing in the RSAs that precludes a privy. And that is something that we have absolutely no control over. Only the health officer, only if we adopted the inspection process for that, because I talked to Tom Morrison, who's the health officer, about that. Concerning a couple of privies in town, and he said he's never inspected them because we don't have any kind of mechanism, but they do. I mean, it's an accepted form, and something like this, you pretty much expect to see it. This is taking it one step further and making it, just so they can have the indoor plumbing versus having to go out to the back house.
Right. And
You don't want to cut you out of the business.
Addresses privies.
Yes, but they leave all the stuff on it to us, the health officers in the towns. They don't, yeah, if you called DES about a privy, they'd say, talk to your health officer. They don't want to touch it.
Yeah.
and then what about any future expansion or, you know, when would it trigger a site plan review? That's all I'm concerned about.
If they were going to, as long as it stays like this, and say that there are more kids along the line, which chances are
Right,
they
and they
will,
want more
they
generation.
would have to
They'll
come
have to come
back
back, they
to
want
this
more
board
cabins.
Right, so that's why I wanted to get the number.
with the same
4
things.
Street.
Yeah.
So
you
3
know,
and 4 and 1 is 8.
Right, and they could, it would be the same process. They would be going to increase the special exception.
Right, okay.
The only time it would go to planning board is if there was any commercial application, or if they intended to cut off a piece of the parcel at that point. And then it becomes a worm ball because that's development along Class 6 roads. Our planning board only allows single-family development, as with due diligence, that's signed off with that waiver.
Right.
And that's through the select board. So anything like that wouldn't fit this board or wouldn't fit the Board of Selectmen, would send them to the planning board.
Okay, all right, good. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't overlooked,
We never have the same thing twice, so.
Additions, that would be something, see, we're only talking numbers here. It would go to intent, since they're basically bare cabins with beds in them anyway. If you wanted to put a 20-foot addition on, chances are, number one, that wouldn't be on all the buildings at once. And secondly, that would fall under a regular building permit. Because, as Patrice had noticed earlier, there really doesn't seem to be a space constraint on this property.
That's the thing, it's so huge.
And even the clearings that they have mapped out with these buildings, they won't be at all close. It's probably as close as buildings in your neighborhood.
And, if they overload the septic system and it fails, then they've got to replace it. So that's kind of self-limiting to a certain
Yes.
extent. So, anyway, it's my 2 cents.
Okay. All right, well, we're ready.
Anything else,
Thank you,
Brian?
Brian. No,
You're
thank
welcome.
you for
And if
helping
we
to
could just,
clarify.
if you could just refer to this for,
I'm going to read them into the record.
perfect.
So, okay, thank you. I appreciate your allowing us to have a chance to read over this document. And what I'd like to do is, I understand that the memo of understanding we had been informed about that was in the works has, the town attorney has advised that we can adopt his, what was going to be in that memo as conditions of approval for our special exception. So I'd like to read these into the record, and I understand Shomers have seen the document in the drafts and are aware of the memo. So what we'd like to add as conditions of approval, that without the first statement is without a special exception from the Plymouth CZA, there be no more than 4 structures on the lot, not including accessory structures exempt from permit per Article 11, Section 1102.8 of the Plymouth zoning ordinance. We don't have to worry about that because we granted the special exception. A limitation of the use of the property to family members and their guests is a condition. No sale, subleasing, or rental of the individual structures. Recognition that a subdivision of this parcel can only be attained when Hunt Road is accepted as a Class 5 road by the town. A reference to the recorded limits of municipal liability, which we've also included as one of our facts. The special exception shall run with the land, subject to the obligation of successive property owners to execute and record a RSA 674-41 Notice of Limits of Municipal Liability in a form acceptable to the Plymouth Selectmen, contemporaneous with the transfer of title to a successive owner. This applicant acknowledges the terms of this special exception and consents to its recording at the Registry of Deeds. And then the final exception would be that all applicable cable permits, state and local permits be applied for and obtained and be in place. So do we have everything? Anybody want to add anything? Okay, and those are, we just wanted to make sure that was in the record, and I want to thank Mr. Doyle for speaking up and understand that it's great when people can work together on certain things where our hands are bound on a Class 6 road, but we certainly encourage, and we know that when people are living in such a beautiful area, they'll hopefully work together to maintain the roadway so that everybody can use it as it was intended to be used. So we thank you for coming this evening, and thank you to the Shomers. I wish you. I'm very jealous. I have 7 kids, and I think this is a great concept. Except I'd spread them out farther.
Madam Chair, should you just vote on these, just for the
yes,
technicality?
vote on the,
the motion, make the motion to accept them as written and
Okay.
expressed, and then we're
I
all
move
good.
that we accept this memorandum as written.
Okay, the conditions. Okay, Neil moved.
Second?
Butch second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And do we have anything else here? Let's see.
I don't think
So, unfinished business, communications?
No,
No, so,
not
do we
till the
have any-
19th.
Okay, and why don't we just say our next meeting is August?
Oh, gosh, I'll have to look.
I think it's the 8th.
I think you're right.
No, it's not the 8th, it's the 7th. It's a Tuesday.
As we got off cycle here.
Right, because
It
it's...
is Tuesday, August 7th.
Okay, so Tuesday,
yeah.
August 7th is our next meeting, and Howard, if you're listening, we hope we see you there. All right, thank you for coming. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you very much. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so this is pretty smooth, guys.